Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Live by Night, starring Ben Affleck, Elle Fanning, Brendan Gleeson, Chris Messina, Sienna Miller, Zoe Saldana, and Chris Cooper, directed by Ben Affleck. Now, I remember going to the theater for this and thinking, this movie's not that good. I just remember being bored with it. Is it still remaining the case with this viewing? Well, let's get into it and we'll find out. In the 1920s, Joe Coughlin, I don't know if I'm saying that right, please forgive me, played by Ben Affleck, is robbing a poker game as he has an inside man who happens to be a woman named Emma Gould, played by Sienna Miller, as he's robbing a mob boss named Albert White, as Joe sees Emma whenever Albert is out of town, as he's in love with her, and I'm not buying their chemistry. Joe and Emma have dinner together until they are met by Joe's father, who is a police captain named Thomas, played by Brendan Gleeson, whom I always enjoy in the movies. But he disapproves of Emma as she is upset by Thomas's behavior with her. And the problem is Ben Affleck and Sienna Miller don't have the chemistry as he did with Rebecca Hall in The Town, which is a much better movie than this, in my opinion. Joe meets with an Italian gangster who is Albert's rival as he wants Albert taken out. Otherwise, he will let Albert know about Joe's affair with Emma, and that doesn't make any sense. And this is a long movie at 2 hours and 8 minutes, and I think a few minutes could have been be cut out of this movie. And this whole romance thing is one of them. Joe and his partner Dion Bartolo, played by Chris Messina, pull off a bank robbery and are immediately pursued by cops as they crash a civilian car before speeding away after Dion and their other partner, I should say, make it another car. And while Joe stays in the first getaway car as the cops pursue both cars, leading to a chase down the street that ends up causing the cop cars to crash and burn along with Joe being ejected from his car. And I wasn't thrilled with the car chase scene. Joe rushes over to a casino to meet with Emma so they can skip town as they go in an elevator and kiss passionately before Emma regretfully reveals it was a trap. Albert's large thugs pull Joe and starts beating him mercilessly and even kicking Joe in the groin hard enough to make him puke. He is pulled outside where Albert and his goons plan to kill him, but Thomas and his squad arrive, facing Albert and his men to leave as the cops arrest Joe. And I just felt bad for Joe for getting in this situation, but at the same time, it's his fault to begin with, as Chief Inspector Calvin Bondurant, I don't know if I'm saying that right, please forgive me, wants to put Joe in prison for life for the death of the officers, but Thomas blackmails him into giving Joe only 3 years, which sort of makes sense. 2 weeks before Joe is set to be released, Thomas passes away as Joe attends his funeral, and I'm getting bored with this movie at this point. Someone commented on my Argo review that it was dull. That not my review, but the movie itself. And I've got to be honest with you, this movie is pretty dull, in my opinion, as this isn't my favorite directorial debut by Ben Affleck. With nothing and nobody left for him, Joe goes to Maso and asks for work. In getting revenge against Albert, Maso has Joe relocate to Ibar City in Tampa, Florida, to be the strongman for Maso's rum business. Joe reunites with Dion and heads down to Ebar, or Ebor, something like that. I don't know how that title is spelled, to start working. They meet a Cuban businessman named Esteban Suarez, aka Miguel, to help them out. Joe becomes smitten with Esteban's sister Gracilia, I don't know if I'm saying that right, played by Zoe Saldana. And this movie looks fine, but it's not the best movie I've ever seen, and I expected more from Mr. Affleck's directorial debut. And this is going to be his first film I'm absolutely bored with. And if it weren't for the show, I wouldn't have come back and finished off the damn thing. Joe and Dion kill Albert's men in Tampa as they horn in on the rum business. Much the gangster's rage, Joe later meets with Chief Irving Figgis, played by Chris Cooper, to help to set up a gambling hotel in collaboration with the Ritz after Mesa has asked Joe to get on the gambling business. The men also meet Irving's daughter Loretta, played by Elle Fanning, who is heading off to Hollywood with ambitions of becoming an actress. And Elle Fanning is a pretty good actress to pull off the acting skills, but we'll see how the character goes. And unfortunately, I don't care for these characters as much, as they're absolutely boring. Joe Speakeasy clubs and business are attracting a lot of business, and he is personally attracting the attention of Graciela, although she is telling him they will not be lovers. They quickly head into a room to make love, which makes absolute zero sense. One evening, one of Joe's clubs is disturbed by the Ku Klux Klan putting up a burning cross outside. One of the Klan's member, R.D. Pruitt, terrorizes and robs the establishments. He also happens to be Irving's brother-in-law. Joe has Irving arrange a meeting with R.D. Despite R.D. being a dim-witted bigot, Joe calmly attempts to negotiate a 15% cut in order for R.D. to stop harassing people and killing businesses. And surprisingly, R.D. agrees, and I'm just going to say it straight up. Not only is this movie but this is a boring film at 2 hours and 8 minutes, and I don't understand what the fuck is happening at this point. Despite the deal, R.D. starts growing around killing Joe's customers out of his racist agenda. Joe and Dion go to meet with Grand Wizard of the KKK, Gary L. Smith, who runs an establishment of his own. Gary informs the men that many Klan members work in the community, including police officers. Since Gary has less power than any of them, Dion shoots Gary dead in front of a bunch of his employees. And this is not what I wanted from this movie, because it's not Black Klansmen good as far as the story is concerned. Joe goes to Irving's house. Irving states that there were 70 witnesses to the murder, but nobody is stepping forward to testify. He tells Joe about how Loretta has turned to drugs and prostitution in Hollywood. Joe wants Irving to take care of R.D., but Irving can't bring himself to give R.D. up. He tells Joe to be man enough to kill R.D. himself, and honestly, this movie doesn't have the balls to impress me with the story, as the movie is unfocused, as it doesn't know what its plot is. Joe meets with R.D. outside of the Ritz, which is under construction. R.D. brings two of his goons outside with guns. R.D. declares he won't stop. He wants what he's doing, and he threatens to kill Graciela to Joe's face. Joe takes out his gun and shoots R.D. dead, which good fucking riddance, because that guy was annoying as hell. While Dion and a couple of other guys come out of hiding and kill R.D.'s guys. Joe gets shot in the side as a result, but he survives. Soon, Joe and his men start fighting back against the Klan, causing them to retreat from Tampa. And thank God, because those motherfuckers are nuts. And if that's what it wants to be about, fine, but don't make it all over the place. Loretta returns home and suffers abusive punishment from her father. She begins preaching to the masses in a tent about repenting and making herself an example of the results of sinful living. Because of this, Joe is unable to receive government funding for the Ritz, since Loretta's sermons have put people off from gambling and drugs. This also causes Meso and his gang to distance themselves from Joe and his business, but unfortunately, I'm not buying it. Joe encounters Loretta in a restaurant by herself, which expresses her true feelings over God and her sins, and how she thinks heaven is already here on earth. Joe then asks why he feels like hell. Loretta responds, because we fucked up, which is what the movie is, a fuck up. Dion approaches Joe the next day with the newspaper reporting on Loretta's death, as she slit her throat in her father's bed the previous night. Joe is visibly distraught by the news, and Elle Fanning deserves better than this thing, in my opinion. Joe visits Esteban and sees a picture he took in a casino, and he sees Emma in the picture after believing her to be dead, which is a bullshit call, and it wasn't earned. Knowing she is in Miami, he decides to go looking for her. He discloses this with Graciela first, and I would if I were married to her too. Maso and his gang are in Tampa. Joe meets with him in his home, and Maso wants to get rid despite the expansion of his business, but mainly because of his failure with the gambling venture and for killing Loretta. For bringing down, he gives Joe the option of working under his son Digger, and not to be confused with the N word, but I'm talking about Digger with the D. Let's move on. Or to clean up the shit out of his toilet. Joe says he will work under Digger. To Joe's surprise, as he learns that Maso is now working with Albert, who is there with a Tommy gun to kill Joe. Joe pulls out the picture of Emma, and he finds out that even Albert didn't know she was still alive. Soon Joe's men start coming in from the tunnels, which Maso figures out is how they have been getting rum and drugs through. Joe's men start killing Maso's men, while Joe fights Albert. Dion and a few other guys go in with their guns and shoot Maso's guys and throw them over the staircase. Joe kills Albert by shooting himself through the wall. He waits for Maso as he gets to fix himself a drink. After telling Maso that Digger is dead, Joe shoots Maso in the chest, killing him. Afterwards, Joe hands his business over to Dion, who takes them in under his wing. Joe's voiceover states that Dion ran the business for 8 years and did not live to see old age, as he predicted. And I didn't want to watch anymore, as I'm not checked out quite yet, but I wanted this thing to be over. Joe finds Emma working outside a brothel. She explains how she faked her death by having her driver run their car into the river, and she took the refuge with a fisherman. Emma says she loves the feeling of being free. Joe asks if she ever loved him the way he loved her. She makes it clear that she didn't feel the same way. Joe leaves her for good, which I would do if someone said that to me, as I would say goodbye forever. Joe and Graciela moved to Miami to start their own business building houses for the poor. They have a son named Tomas, I'll say, without the H, named after Joe's father. One afternoon, Irving, who has now gone mad after Loretta's death, goes after the Coughlin house and starts shooting while yelling, "Repent, repent." Graciela rushes to protect Tomas as Joe goes outside and shoots Irving dead. Unfortunately, Graciela was shot and killed. Joe cries over her body. She is later buried in her native home in Cuba, and I just don't care anymore. Joe continues to do the right by his son. He takes him to the movies and sees his brother wrote the film. Joe's voiceover states that Tomas wants to grow up to be a police officer. He talks about wanting to see his mother in heaven. Joe says he tells his son what Loretta told him. Heaven is already there. on Earth, and I was glad when credits started rolling, and this isn't the worst movie I've seen. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 2.5 out of 10. This movie isn't the worst I've ever seen, but it's the worst of the directorial debut of Ben Affleck. I didn't care for the characters as they had no chemistry with each other whatsoever. The movie bored me to the point it was too long and I was waiting for the credits to start rolling, as this movie is dull, dull, dull. It's sad to me with the bad that I to end with the bad movie because Ben Affleck made two really good movies, but it had to end with the downer. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and until whenever we get another one, have a good one, I guess. No, seriously, have a good one.